All right. Well, very good afternoon. Again, formally welcome to this webinar chat. Second day of the Chambers webinar chat. We had a good one yesterday on Suddenly Remote. And today we have a very special guest with us. Today is a different day than yesterday, and this hour is different than the last hour. Things are changing and things are moving fast. We all are aware of, what's happening, and there is so much that is changing by the hour. There are a lot of us that are in the middle of some very, very dramatic and drastic changes that is affecting our personal life, affecting our businesses, affecting the people we work with, employees, affecting the community. And it's not easy on anyone. But I know that in our community and in Canada, we have the resolve to get through this. And I'm very confident that we're doing the right thing, that we are collectively working on ensuring that we will prevail, that we will get over this. It won't come easy. There is definitely pain that all of us are experiencing, employees that have been laid off, companies that have been shut down, and the instances of people that are being affected by COVID-19, and that number that keeps on going up by the hour. But having said that, as I mentioned, it is on us to collectively work to ensure that we do our part to follow the directions of our elected officials, of our health officials, and we're doing our best to ensure that we don't give the virus a chance to spread anymore. We are taking care of hygiene, we're taking care of social distancing, and we are doing everything within our means to do whatever that has been advised to us from the officials, and the information from them is coming every day. We're getting updates from our local health unit. We have updates coming in from the federal government, from the provincial government as well. So we're collecting all of this information and we are updating our website, the Chamber's website. We have a dedicated page on COVID-19 resources. So you'll find the latest and the greatest information there. So please feel free to access that information. We're updating it by the hour as we get that information. So, as I mentioned, that there's a lot that's happening, but there are a lot of people that are working tirelessly to ensure that we get the support that we need, that businesses get the support, that your voices is heard, that your concern is relayed to the right people, that your inputs are taken to ensure that we can minimize the damage to you. We can help you with, the relief that you desperately need. You can find out what the interim measures are being taken by the federal and all levels of government. And we are incredibly lucky to have with us Irek Kusmierczyk, our MP, who works tirelessly to ensure that, he is gathering all the information and he's relaying to the appropriate authorities on what our needs are in this community. And I know him personally, and he leaves no stone unturned to help the business community, to help the community at large. A few months back, in October, who knew, that when the elections happen, things will take such a turn. But aren't we glad that, Irek is the one that won and is here to represent us as our MP. So we're very grateful, Irek, to you for making time to connect with the chamber members and with the business community at large here. And we thank you for doing what you do on a daily basis. I know you leave no stones unturned and you're working tirelessly to help the community here. So we have collected few questions, concerns, and inputs from the business community. And we have few things that we would like to share with you and few questions that we'd like to ask you. So before I get started, tell us, how are you doing? Working remotely, things have changed for everyone, for you as well. How are you dealing with the situation? And I know that your wife is a nurse practitioner, Shauna. How is she doing? How are you doing as a recently married couple? And how's life? And how are you dealing with these sudden upheaval?
Well, thank you very much, Rakesh. And I just want to begin by saying, really, it is me that's very fortunate to be able to work with community leaders like yourself, like the Chamber, some of the members here that are on the call, and having the opportunity, really, the last couple days and last couple weeks of working with very closely with residents, speaking to them on the phone, working with tremendous organizations in our community, like the Chamber, the hospital, the university, speaking with amazing leaders, whether it's Mayor Dilkins, whether it's Mayor McNamara, you name it, whether it's the CEOs of Windsor Regional Hospital or Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare, speaking with organizations like women's shelters and homeless shelters and the Mission. We're very fortunate to have the community that we have. And what I can tell you is there is a tremendous amount of distress in the community when you listen to folks, but there's also a tremendous amount of resilience in our community and a tremendous amount of leadership. And you see examples of it every single day. You see St. Clair College stepping up and donating medical equipment. You see FCA committing to producing 1 million masks a day, converting their operations to produce medical supplies. You look at the University of Windsor, which is hosting a hackathon, which is bringing together 500 brilliant young minds to try to come up with solutions to the challenges surrounding COVID. You look at the fact that even yesterday we had Takeout Tuesday, where the community went out to their local restaurants and eating establishments and ordered in and took takeout or delivery and to try to support local businesses. And you look at, for example, even larger organizations or initiatives like Prosper Us coming together because they want to make sure that the food banks have enough supply to feed people that are in need. So as traumatic as this is, as distressful as it is to listen to all the pain that's in the community, and it's there because we are very much the ground zero for a lot of the economic fallout of COVID. But it is incredibly reassuring to be in this together with the community that we have. And it gives you courage, it gives you resilience to carry on. And you asked me a question about my wife, Shauna, who's a nurse practitioner, and I can tell you, there are days where she clocks in at 9 o'clock in the morning and doesn't get home until about 1:45. And I can't say enough about our frontline staff, our frontline workers, whether it's healthcare, whether it's EMS, whether it's border services, whether it's the folks working at the groceries, at the grocery store, you name it. We are so very fortunate. We're so very fortunate to have these leaders and these champions and these heroes, quite frankly, just going out and carrying out their everyday lives and helping us out. So again, really, I just feel very fortunate to be part of this incredibly compassionate, collaborative, and caring community.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. And I know, Eric, that you're in cabinet calls every day, so you keep yourself updated on what's happening. You're relaying the information back and forth. So thank you for doing that. So can you please tell us as to what's happening at the federal level? Like, what are some of the measures the federal government is taking to address the situation?
So that's an excellent question. So one of the things I just wanted to say right off the bat is that this is a process in the sense that what you're going to be seeing is the federal government responding to situations on the ground and ramping up the supports that are available as the local situation warrants. And as we hear from businesses and as we hear from Canadians on the ground, the government stands ready to bring in ever more significant measures to provide support. So if you think back 2 weeks ago, and it almost seems like an eternity now, the government first responded with $1 billion that it gave to provinces for immediate emergency preparedness and to purchase medical equipment to make sure that they have the necessary supplies. And then a few days after that, as we started to see sort of layoffs and the economic impact, the government put forward an $82 billion emergency support plan. That's about $55 billion in deferments in terms of taxes and whatnot, and about $27 billion that it goes directly to individuals and businesses. This represents 3% of our GDP. This is unprecedented. It is an unprecedented outlay of funding to match the fact that this is an unprecedented crisis, but there are more funds available. The government has made sure that we have the financial firepower necessary to ramp up even further the supports that are necessary. The centerpiece of the benefits, the financial supports that came forward, were really focused on getting money in the hands of individual Canadians who are out of work, who don't have an income, and so that they're able to pay their bills, buy their groceries, keep the lights on at home, pay their mortgage, buy their rent. And so the centerpiece of that particular initiative was the emergency benefit. And as we heard this morning, this is obviously evolving. Those benefits were sort of consolidated into one emergency response benefit. And what it basically means is that Canadians who do not qualify for the traditional employment insurance benefits that are still out there will receive $2,000 every month for the next 4 months. And in order to sort of qualify for this benefit, you have to be either somebody, for example, who is not able to draw income because they have COVID, they tested positive for COVID, or they are under quarantine. If you're taking care of family members who tested positive and are under quarantine, you also qualify for the $2,000. If you are at home taking care of children, because if you're not able to work, you're staying at home to take care of your children or your parents because childcare centers have closed, you also qualify. But the $2,000, the emergency benefit, it is also for people that have lost income or work, or who continue to be employed, but they are not drawing an income. They're eligible for the $2,000 per month support over the next 4 months, as long as they don't qualify for the regular EI payments. And also self-employed people, self-employed folks, entrepreneurs who have seen their income dry up are also eligible for the $2,000 per month over the next 4 months. So that sort of is the centerpiece of the supports that goes directly to Canadians, but we're also increasing the Canada Child Benefit, which is going to increase by $300 per child, and we're increasing the GST credits as well. So in total, those two measures, which are automatic when you file your taxes, will also pump about $1,500 into the pockets of the average Canadian family as well too. We're also extending a moratorium on Canada student loans for 6 months, which means that students that have Canada student loans don't have to pay back for 6 months. There's no interest that will accumulate on those payments as well. And we're also deferring tax payments. So if you file your taxes and you owe the government money, you don't have to pay a penny of that until August 31st. That is sort of the centerpiece of these supports, and the whole goal is to make sure that Canadians are able to weather the economic impact of this terrible virus, COVID.
Thanks for that, Eric. I think those are some really very, very positive measures that the government is taking. So kudos to the government for doing it. It's needed very desperately and very badly, and we need it right immediately. As you know, that there is a lot of individuals that are applying for EI, and the claims are increasing by the day. So this will help in reducing that, or at least stalling, the number of people that are applying for EI. So this is very much welcome.
Right, and I just wanted to jump in really quickly. There were over 1 million EI claims in the last week. And again, those are historic numbers. And so we understand that the dislocation and the distress that's out there is enormous. April 6th is when these new funds will come online. People will be able to go to a website, apply online. It'll be incredibly streamlined. You won't need to have supporting documentation. You will just have to give a declaration or attestation. And our aim is to have the money in your pocket within days of applying, so that you can actually have the funding that you need to get you through.
And can you share with us what is the website where people can find more information about this?
So you'll be able to you could either go on the Canada.ca website, or you'll be able to find that information on either the Service Canada website, or that website will become available. You'll actually be applying through the CRA website. So you'll have information on whether you go on Canada.ca, whether you go to Service Canada, they'll be able to direct you to the CRA website, your My CRA website, and that's where you're going to be applying, because these new emergency benefits will be provided, the application will be provided via the CRA website.
Okay, thanks for that. And we'll make sure that we also have that information on the Chamber's website after this call. So thank you for that. So does this, Eric, does this replace, the emergency care benefit and the emergency support benefit that the government had planned to offer earlier on?
You know what it does is it streamlines it. It takes those two measures and puts them together into one simple benefit. And it also just streamlines the process. Anything that we can do to make it simplified, anything that we can do to make sure that the money flows as quickly as possible, and that, again, Canadians understand exactly how they can access the money. So we've taken those two benefits, put them into one benefit as of today.
That's great. No, thanks for that. So, I'm glad to hear that this also applies to business owners, small business owners that, have either shut down their operation or are seeing a huge reduction in their business. So it's really a welcome news. And small businesses, as you know, they're the heart of our economy. Our significant number, I'm told about 97% of our businesses are small and medium-sized enterprises. So we'd like to hear from you as to what is being done for those businesses that have decided to keep their lights on, that are still carrying out business, that still have employees that they have to pay, that still have, or maybe some of them are manufacturing essential supplies that are needed at this time. So what support, what is being done to help those companies, those entrepreneurs that are still continuing to offer their products and services?
Yeah, thank you, Rakesh. And what an excellent question. And I can tell you, I've spoken to dozens of companies that are saying, Eric, we're going to hold on. We're going to hold on a couple more weeks. We're going to hold on a couple more months, as long as we can, to keep our employees employed. And again, tremendous efforts on their part. I know everyone's doing what they possibly can. One of the things that we've provided, or this government has put forward in this most recent basket of supports, is we've reduced the capital buffer that's required of banks, for example. So normally banks have to maintain a certain amount of assets or capital assets sort of in reserve. We've reduced that, which in turn, what it has meant is that it has made $300 billion of capital available as loans to businesses that are struggling with liquidity. And so that is a huge measure. It means that money is available for loans and credit and whatnot. For those companies that are a little bit more higher risk, for example, that they may not be able to borrow money from the banks, they could also approach the BDC or EDC, Business Development Canada or Export Development Canada. And we've set aside $10 billion specifically of additional funding for BDC and EDC that businesses can access. But I can't emphasize enough that the first port of call, the first place that businesses should go is to their local lender, is to their local bank, because again, we've made it a lot easier for those businesses to be able to get capital at a lower interest rate, I might add, to businesses, get that out the door. We've also included something called the wage subsidy, which is a 10% wage subsidy. And in essence, what it is a reduction in the payroll taxes that businesses have to remit either quarterly or whatnot to CRA, which means that businesses don't have to remit the income taxes that they garner from their employees. They're able to keep that money and deploy it as is necessary. We've also extended the tax deadline to August 31st as well for companies to pay their deadlines, which allows them to keep that capital and that funding a little bit longer in their pockets. And we've also introduced a work share program, which is a program that when business is lean, when times are tough, when there isn't a lot of income, a lot of business, what businesses can do is they can share the work. When there's not a lot of work, they can share the work amongst their employees. So for example, rather than laying off 2 people, they'll have, let's say, 4 people working part-time. And then the Canadian government steps in and tops up their income with EI. And so it's a partnership, it's a formal partnership between businesses and also the government to be able to keep those employees there as much as possible and share the work that is there. So those are some of the things that we've brought on the table. Again, I've spoken to countless businesses. We know that more needs to be done. And I can reassure business owners that this is really the first step in a larger process, and the government is ready to step in. And one of the reasons why we wanted to pass these emergency measures that passed the House of Commons this morning before 6 a.m. is it gives the finance minister and it gives our government the ability to respond faster, with more flexibility, and to be able to provide the level of support that businesses require to remain solvent and, most importantly, to keep their employees working.
Thanks, Irek. You mentioned about a couple of items that I wanted to dive in a little bit more. The 10% wage subsidy, as you mentioned, that is a good start, but we all know that it isn't enough, and we've heard a lot from our business community that the 10% wage subsidy does not really make a difference to keeping their employees on. It's a benefit, but not enough at this time. And there are some good examples of countries like Switzerland and Sweden, or Netherlands actually, where the wage subsidy has been increased to as much as 75%. So we're hearing this from a lot of our members, a lot of people from the business committee, that the 10% wage subsidy needs to be increased. And if we do that, the number of people applying for EI will also reduce, and that will reduce the huge amount of workload on officials that are working on making the EI benefits accessible to others that really need it. So is there anything that is being done by the government to review the 10% wage subsidy and likely increase it?
No, so that's a great question. And we've heard that, again, from a number of businesses, that the 10% is not enough. What I can tell you is, again, going back to what I said, that was really the first step. It's the first volley, so to speak. And I can tell you, I've been advocating very hard with our colleagues, with our cabinet members, with the Minister of Small Business, with the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity, with the Finance Minister and whatnot, that we need to increase the wage subsidy program. And I can tell you that you had mentioned, on a day-to-day basis, I'm on a phone call with cabinet ministers, with caucus, to discuss what we're hearing in our communities. What are the issues that we're hearing? And I can tell you that the call to increase the wage subsidies is not just coming from our community, it's something that we're hearing across the country. Mm-hmm. And so I feel very confident that we will respond in short order. Our first order of business is to get this emergency bill passed, to get money in the pockets of Canadians as soon as possible. But I can tell you we will respond, and I will continue to advocate again for those supports, additional supports.
Thank you. And you also mentioned about the other two resources that is available for businesses to go to, which is BDC and EDC. I was in conversation with EDC yesterday. I believe they're still firming or finalizing the program, and there will be more information that will be shared soon. As regards BDC, an organization that is a Crown Corporation, I think they provide very valuable service. But one criticism that we have received from a lot of our members is that, the lending rate, the base lending rate is 5.1%, plus on top of that, the variable component can be anywhere between 1 to 12%. So, the minimum that a company is looking at borrowing cost is 6.1% to anywhere 12.1%. In today's, or actually 17.1%. So in today's environment, do you think that this is something that can be reviewed, where the lending rate is brought down to a level that is acceptable in the current environment where people's ability to pay that high level of interest isn't there?
So again, excellent question. I think the way that I would answer it is to say again, I think the focus ought to be to direct businesses to their regular lenders and banks, because of the fact that they do have that $300 billion of capital right now that they're trying to get out the door. So the government is almost is working with those banks to use the banks as really the main vehicle to get the capital and the funding to the businesses. And of course, it's at a much lower rate. And we know the Bank of Canada also reduced its lending rate as well too. And so we're doing everything possible to create conditions where more money is being provided by those banks at a lower rate. What I can tell you is at the moment, so the BDC sets its own rates, and the BDC sets its rates not, it doesn't set one overarching rate. It sets each rate based on the client on a case-by-case basis, depending upon what the risk portfolio is. And so obviously there are some businesses that come forward, have lower risk, they get lower interest rates. Some have higher risk portfolios and or profiles, and they have higher rates. So I don't see the BDC, and I haven't heard anything about the BDC changing its price to risk, the way that it calculates price to risk at this point, or risk to price, I should say. But it is something I'm happy to bring up. But again, I can't emphasize enough that really the first port of call for businesses should be their lenders. They have the capital right now. Sort of the handcuffs have been taken off. The restrictions have been taken off. They should be able to get that capital at a low interest rate.
And that is another issue that we're hearing from our members, that the chartered banks that have received the funding, they have their own ways to assess, who gets funding and who does not, and what interest rate is being charged. We've got companies that have come to us and said that they're having challenges because the way the banks are working with them is based on asset-based lending, which is tied to the inventory that the companies carry or to the receivables. And in today's environment, the receivables are there's a huge risk at that, or either they have completely dried up and they don't carry a lot of inventory. So in this case, when they go to the banks are not able to lend them credit, or if at all, then it's at a much higher interest rate. So is there something that can be done wherein the small businesses get the funding that is required desperately at this point of time, and it is not tied to asset-based lending, and at least their small businesses have a certain recourse to get some amount of funding at an interest rate that makes sense?
Phenomenal observation. I don't have an answer for that, because I don't think that we have a policy in place specifically for that, but it's an excellent question. And again, the concerns around the fact, it absolutely makes sense. If lending if it's based on assets, obviously right now companies have reduced cash flows, have reduced incomes and revenues. So this absolutely makes sense. I will raise that issue at today's call this evening. That's a very, very good point. It's a very good point.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. For the small businesses, payroll is a challenge, and we talked a little bit about that on how they can get some support. The other is rent. Many of them are renting, they have leases that they have to pay. So they're having challenges in covering the rental cost. And there's also the landlords that are also having challenges. Some of these landlords are landlords of commercial establishments, multi-unit residential units, and so on. So there's challenge on both sides. There's the renters who have challenge in covering the rent, and there's also business owners that are landlords who are having problems because the rent is drying down, and they still are expected to pay the mortgage to the banks. Is there anything being done to help both sides?
Yeah, so again, there's nothing officially yet that's been rolled out, but I can tell you that it is something that we are discussing. It has been raised by a number of members of parliament, the issue of needing to find relief for commercial rent. and it is an issue that we're hearing again from a lot of companies, a lot of business owners. So what I can tell you is, even though we don't have a particular policy instrument in place right now, it is absolutely on the table. It's on the radar. It's something that Cabinet is discussing as we speak, because it's something that we are hearing from the business community. So absolutely, we hope to have something, a response for you, an update or an instrument shortly.
Thank you. Our business community has also asked us to bring this to the federal government in terms of a suggestion, which is when they do go and are eligible to get funding, whether it is short-term funding or a long-term funding, is it possible to defer the payments on interest for a certain period of time? Is this something that is part of the package that the government is offering, or right now the small businesses are expected to pay interest on their borrowings?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I haven't come across, in looking at the policies, that there's an interest to payment, that there's a deferment on the interest on the loans. I can get that information for you. I haven't seen anything on that, but I'm happy to ask Minister Ng and Minister of Small Business just to make sure whether there are deferments for interest payments on that or not. I can get that information for you.
Thank you. And as you know, Eric, in our area, there are a lot of companies that have, stepped up. They raised their hand to help out, whether it's locally here or whether it is, to make products available provincially and nationally. We are really fortunate that there are so many innovative companies that are quickly pivoting and making their products, their services available as it is needed. For some of these companies, the roadblock that they're facing is the regulatory burdens, or the certification and the permits that is required, and to get the product or services quickly available for consumption. Is there anything that's being done to streamline the process, where whether it is Health Canada or where there's any other ministry that works with them quickly, and removes the barriers or removes the red tape, so that products and services can be quickly certified and can be made available for people to use?
Yeah, so excellent question. So two things I wanted to say. One is one has to do with us trying to get or procure supply abroad, for example. So we know that right now countries like India, countries like China have the capacity and the wherewithal to be able to mass produce, whether it's N95 masks, whether it's gloves or gowns, ventilators, you name it. And so on the one hand, what we're trying to do is Health Canada, for example, is working day and night, 7 days a week, to be able to accelerate and expedite the authorization that's required to allow some of that material to come across our borders and come into our country. And so I can tell you that I've worked on a couple of cases like that, where again, we're looking at supply and we're trying to expedite Health Canada approvals to get that equipment into Canada as soon as possible for Windsor and Essex County. And then on the flip side, to your point, it's about how do we, as quickly as possible, convert current manufacturing capacity to actually build the supplies here locally, ideally, and across Canada. So almost like a Buy Canada and a Build Canada program. So what I can tell you is that the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, as well as the Ministry of Public Safety and Procurement, PSPC, are the two lead ministries that are working directly with local manufacturers, with manufacturers across Canada, to do exactly as you said, to let them know what are the technical needs precisely, and also to help them streamline the ability to be able to actually build the product here and get it approved and get it to market. Keep in mind that some regulatory oversight has to be there, because you want to make sure that the masks, the ventilators that you're getting into the hospitals, that they're doing what they're doing, that they're protecting the frontline staff as they're supposed to protect them, and that they're actually helping and not harming patients. And so there is always going to be a level of oversight from Health Canada. But I can tell you that all three of those departments are working 7 days a week and night and day, and working in tandem to streamline the process. One really interesting development in the bill that sort of went went today to the House of Commons, and as it was reported in the news, and we don't have the exact details of the actual bill that was approved right now, but what I can tell you is it authorizes the health minister to authorize the manufacturing of patented inventions. So whereas before, somebody like FCA might not be able to produce a certain mask because there's a patent protection around it, these new powers allow the Minister of Health to authorize the production and mass manufacture of patented medical devices and equipment. That's an example of ways that this government is working to clear the brush, to clear the way for manufacturers like FCA and other local companies to be able to mass produce some of these equipment and medical supplies that we need. So this is, you're right, there are a lot of local companies that are stepping up to the plate. We get calls from them on a day-to-day basis saying, I can build this, I can produce this. And again, the best thing to do is again, if you go under canada.ca, any company, any supplier that is able to help either procure or build medical equipment, I encourage you to go to that website and to contact the government of Canada and share your idea or share your plan for that.
Thank you. Thank you. This question is about insurance. There are companies here that pay premium for business interruption, insurance for business interruption, which may be cost because of natural disasters, and they've been paying premium for a long time. This situation could be classified as a natural disaster. So when the companies have raised this and have gone to their insurance companies to ask for reimbursement, the insurance companies have turned it down and have offered no help. In many cases, the companies have received no support at all from the insurance companies. And I think it may also have to do with if the insurance companies start working and reimbursing some, it may open a floodgates, which may eventually end up, bankrupting quite a few of them. Maybe that's the fear. In this current situation, which businesses find themselves, where we think it is reasonable for them to expect some support from the insurance companies, would it be possible for the federal government to backstop the insurance companies and offer the support through the insurance companies to the businesses that are asking for support because of business interruption due to natural disaster?
Again, excellent question. I don't have the answer for you right now. I haven't seen anything about backstopping insurance for business interruption claims. I think maybe one reason could be that I think that this is, and I could be wrong, that this is a provincial jurisdiction, or that's where that aspect rests with the provincial government. Having said that, it is an interesting proposal, Rakesh. I have to say that. And again, I'm happy to raise that with my colleagues and cabinet ministers if there's something that we can do in terms of business interruption insurance. Again, like you said, it's very similar to the interruption that you see for natural disasters. It's probably bigger than that, and it's worth an ask. My instinct tells me it rests with the provincial government, but I'm happy to ask.
Thank you for that, Eric. And we'll also clarify. We'll also reach out to the provincial contacts that we have and find out if this is something that they can address. But thank you for looking into that. What do you say to this local companies here, in terms of how do they should prepare for the next few weeks? What is it that they need to do? Any piece of advice to them?
Well, I think the biggest piece of advice for just Canadians in general is stay home. We've heard that the Prime Minister mentioned that again today. If your workers can work from home, stay home. That's the biggest piece of advice that we can offer. If any tasks are not essential, please do those from home and try to contain the community, the spread in the community of this deadly, or of this virus, this destructive virus. If you are a local business, for example, with spare medical supplies here locally, I would encourage you to call, for example, 311. which is the City of Windsor phone number, call center, and let them know that you have these supplies, and the City of Windsor will be able to actually pick up that equipment from you and deliver it where it needs to be delivered, for example, to Windsor Regional Hospital or the frontline staff there. So if you have some equipment that's lying around, things that you're not using, you know, for example, dentists or whatnot may have masks that they're not utilizing at this point, gloves, things like that, share that with the folks that do need it urgently. I would say if you're a company that can manufacture or can procure medical supplies, to again email the Government of Canada, and I have that email as well. I can provide that through my office at any time, and also provide the website for that at any time. So if there's any local companies that are able to, for example, either procure or to produce, to let us know. There are a lot of local companies that have, for example, existing contacts in India or China and abroad, other places that we know already manufacture these goods. I encourage local businesses also to leverage their contacts, their business contacts in those countries, to connect with manufacturers of that equipment, to see if we can help procure that equipment and get that into the hands of our doctors and nurses and frontline staff in our community. That's another way to help, is to leverage those existing networks. If you've traveled, whether on pleasure or business, in the last 14 days, stay home for 14 days, self-isolate, self-quarantine. And I can't tell you how absolutely critical that is, especially if you're traveling to Michigan. We know that Michigan is becoming a hot spot right now with a large number of positive tests and confirmations. And if you have any symptoms whatsoever, whether at work or whether at home, and you've traveled, call the Windsor Health Unit. Call the Windsor Health Unit. Let them know that you're having the symptoms. Their number is, provided, it's 519-258-2146, extension 1420. Let them know that you have these symptoms. But again, self-isolate as much as possible. I think that's the message that we're trying to get home. Everybody needs to do their part. This is a community effort. The only way we're going to get through this is if we all pull together, do our part. And again, like I said, that's the message, I think.
Thanks, Eric. There's also some concern about possible interprovincial border closures. Is this something which you've heard, or is this something that's being contemplated? And if yes, how is that going to really affect supplies, essential supplies, as well as goods that need to move between borders, interprovincial borders?
Yeah, the question of borders is a really, really good one. So I'll take your first question regarding the interprovincial borders. I have not heard anything in my conversations over the last 2 weeks that would indicate that there would be a closure of interprovincial borders. So there's nothing, there has not been a mention of that I've heard. In my understanding, those interprovincial borders are closed or could be closed under emergency measures, for example, that are put forward. If the federal were to enact the Emergency Act, it could close, for example, provincial borders. But there's so much inflow and outflow of medical equipment and services and whatnot across borders that I really can't see that working. And even at this point, I think there's only one premier that has called for the federal government to enact emergency measures, the Emergency Measures Act, or the Emergency Act. And so even though the government always reserves the right to enact the Emergency Act, at this point, it's not something that the premiers are calling for, and it's something that we're monitoring on a day-to-day basis. But it's not something that is being called for by the premiers to close those borders. It leads me to my conversation about the Windsor-Detroit border, and when the first announcement was made from Ottawa by the Prime Minister that we were closing the borders to foreign nationals, I was on the phone within minutes to Mayor McNamara, to the president of the University of post-secondary institutions, talking to folks in the county and whatnot, because we knew the impact that it was going to have on regional businesses. So for example, temporary foreign workers. Right from the get-go, I can tell you that I was advocating for making sure that we open or we make exemptions for temporary foreign workers, because we know there are literally over 10,000 foreign workers that help to plant our crops, help to harvest our crops, help to process our crops and process our food. And this was about food security as much as it was about making sure that we support our regional businesses as well. So we advocated very hard on a day-to-day basis to get that exemption for temporary foreign workers. We know how absolutely important it was. We also know that we wanted exemptions as well for international students as well that had already received permits and clearance to come here. So not new permits, but existing permits, because we know how important research is. A lot of those are graduate students. We know they're doing important research in our institutions as well. So we advocated for the exemption of those international students as well. But I can tell you that every conversation that I've had, there's an understanding that we need to keep the border to trade and commerce first and foremost. This is a lifeline, not just to our community, but it's a lifeline to Ontario. It's a lifeline to Canada. It's a lifeline for American states, is to keep that border open to trade and commerce. And that's something that we advocated for very, very strongly from the very beginning, to keep that border open for trade and commerce, because we know how absolutely important it is, not just for goods and services, but medical supplies, food, fuel, the essentials that we require. And so we wanted to make sure that it was open. And to be honest, I have not heard any discussion or anyone calling for the closure of the border for trade and commerce. What I can tell you is there is a debate right now about there's a debate in our community. I know the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit sort of sounded the alarms or sounded concern about the essential workers that are crossing the border, including the thousands of nurses that live in Windsor, but they work in Detroit. And there's concern about, especially with Michigan and Detroit being a hotspot for COVID, the potential for there to be spread or community spread of this virus for the nurses that are moving back and forth. So there is a discussion in the community that we've seen. Again, the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit has raised that issue, and that is an issue that is being monitored carefully. I can tell you that.
Okay, thank you for that. Talking about international students that are coming here, there is also a significant number of students that are here, international students, and unfortunately they don't really qualify for EI benefits or for other benefits that right now the government is offering. And there are also some gig economy workers that don't necessarily have the protection of EI and a proper job that they can fall back on. Is there something that's being done by the government? Because I know that one of the mandate of your Minister for Labor is to provide support to the gig economy workers. Yeah.
So even if you are in the gig economy, for example, so if you are, let's say a tour guide that provides tours, across Windsor and Essex, for example, and that is your business or whatnot, or that's what you do, you're self-employed and whatnot, you will be able to access the emergency benefits. You'll be able to get $2,000 per month for the next 4 months, and you'll be able to apply for those emergency benefits if you are in the gig economy. And in fact, early on, when we started to see the economy shed jobs, that was one of the first talking points. That was one of the first things that we raised. How do we protect the folks that aren't going to be protected with the existing social safety net? How do you protect the folks that don't qualify for EI benefits, whether regular or special benefits? And so the emergency benefits really was created with those folks in mind, with folks that are working in the gig economy. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is the first step, and the government is prepared to do more, to bring in additional supports as will be required, as we hear from people. In terms of international students, for these emergency benefits, something that I have to confirm is my understanding is that if the international student has a social insurance number, has a permit to work here, they are eligible for the emergency benefits. But that is something that I have to confirm, and especially since we've seen this new emergency measures evolve over the last 24 hours, even because of the negotiations and the debates that took place in Parliament overnight. And so I have to sort of delve into the minutia of that bill to see if that is in fact the case. So again, I don't want to confirm that, but that's something that I can get, that information I can get for you in terms of international students.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. We've got few questions. We've got time to take a few questions from our attendees, so I'll get into that. One of the questions, and I think there are more on the same theme, but it's got to do with the financial package that was announced today. Where unemployed or people that can't work, you're going to get $2,000 per month, which I believe is for the next 4 months.
Yes.
So the question related to that is, so if there is a company that is laying off people, will they qualify for that, or will they have to go and apply for EI? So company laying off people, will the employees go apply for EI benefit, or will they automatically qualify for the $2,000 per month, and where should they apply?
Yeah, so if you are eligible to apply for EI, you should apply for regular EI benefits, and you can apply through Service Canada. You can apply either online, in person, in sort of extraordinary situations in person, because a lot of the offices right now are closing or restricting traffic, but online and by phone is the best way to get a hold of Service Canada and look at your eligibility. If you are eligible, you basically you apply for regular EI payments. If you're not eligible, that's where you will go to the MyCRA website, the Canada Revenue Agency website, and on April 6th, when it goes online, around that date, you'll be able to apply online for the emergency benefits. Again, if you're not eligible or qualify for regular EI, you'll qualify, you'll get the emergency EI benefits.
Okay, thank you. And this question on work sharing. So I believe there is a waiting period of 30 days before they start getting the contribution on work share. So is that 30-day waiting period still in place, or has that been reduced or waived off?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question for the work sharing program. I believe so there's a cooling off period. So for example, you can apply for work sharing programs up to normally it was 2 years. And so you would be allowed to, you would get into an agreement with the federal government to do work sharing for a year, let's say. And then before you're able to sign another work sharing term, you had to have a cooling off period. So we know that period has been waived, but I'm not aware of a waiting period beforehand with these new measures. I'm pretty sure that right now it's immediate. So I think there have been over 100. I want to say there have been over 150 work share agreements that have been signed with the federal government at this point. It's usually larger companies that sort of take advantage of the work sharing program. But again, we want to make sure that those folks are able to keep those employees as soon as possible. I'm not aware of a 30-day waiting period. I am aware of a cooling period in between work sharing regimes, but that has been waived.
Okay, thank you. And this is a question where if an employee who wants to stay home, even if they're not sick or if they have no kids to take care of, in those situations, can they still apply for, if they're not eligible for EI, can they still get the $2,000 relief fund through the government?
So as long as over the last year or over the last 52 weeks that you had an income of $5,000, you're able, and let's say you're no longer able, you have no income and you have to stay home with the kids, because again, the kids are not in daycare or childcare. Yes, you'll be eligible for the $2,000. The only thing you have to attest to, you don't have to demonstrate it, just attest to it, that yes, in the last 52 weeks or over the last year, I have had an income of $5,000. You have to meet that minimum threshold. So also just wanted to add as well, even if you are a worker who has been, who is still employed, but has no income, you're still eligible for the $2,000 per month.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification there.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. There's a question on loan for small business. Is there a certain range that the government is offering through the chartered banks in terms of what the small business can get?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. In terms of the chartered banks, to be honest with you, I haven't heard a cap on those loans. I'm not sure, Rakesh, if you've heard of any caps. I haven't heard of any.
No, I have not.
Okay.
I've not. I think it really depends on the banking arrangements you have, the current banking arrangements you have with the chartered bank. If you don't have a relationship with the chartered bank, and if you're going there as a new client, I think they will assess your business and they will then decide on how much loan they can offer, and that would be based on certain lending criteria that they have.
Yeah, and I think I'm just looking at some notes here that I've got scattered on my desk here, but I think BDC, for example, has restrictions in terms of they support companies that or they don't support companies that have that have been in operation for fewer than 2 years. And so for BDC and EDC, you have to have been in operation for 2 years to be able to get benefit or to get some of the supports there. But the financial institutions, I don't think that they have any caps or any limits like that.
And thanks for clarifying that, because that's been a concern that's been voiced, because there are companies that are younger than 2 years, and the concern is, where are they going to go and how are they going to get the support? So if the chartered banks are going to work with those companies that are 2 years or less in operation, that's good news. So I urge everyone to go talk to their banking institutions and let us know if you have an issue with your banks and if you have an issue in accessing these small business funds.
No, exactly. You raise a good point, Rakesh, because there are a number of startup companies that again, they're quite promising and they're in the early stages. And you're right, some of them haven't hit that 2-year operating period, and so they need access to capital. So that is something to raise with our small business minister for sure. Okay.
Great. I think we have time to take one more question, and let's see which one it is. Yeah, I think this question is to do with businesses that are facing a shutdown. What about the expenses that they have incurred, for example, or they're incurring before they either have a reduced business or are likely going to shut down? Expenses such as rent, taxes, payments that they're supposed to do. What is being done to help them with that?
So again, in terms of companies that are winding down, again, I would say that just what jumps to mind is again that $300 billion of capital and liquidity that banks are offering at a low percentage. And that really should be the first port of call for most companies that are requiring funding is loans. I haven't seen any instruments at this point, any vehicles at this point that provide funding for companies that are winding down directly. But I can ask our colleagues, our cabinet colleagues who represent that particular ministry, if there's anything in place for companies that are winding their operations down. And one thing that I just wanted to say as well is you know, I really do appreciate this opportunity here because, you know, every day we're talking to, again, residents and businesses and organizations, and everything that I hear, I have an opportunity to bring that forward with our cabinet colleagues. We have a conversation, we have a phone call every day. I get a chance to talk with ministers across different departments, and I get to share everything that I hear on the line speaking to residents from Windsor and Essex. So I can tell you that your voice is being heard in Ottawa every single day. Your messages are being delivered every single day. And even if I don't have an answer for you, let's say today, if you share with me a question or a concern, I will make sure that that question and concern gets to cabinet, gets to the specific ministers, and we either get that response for you or get that answer for you, or get a response from you from government for that particular issue. So everything that you share today, everything you share on the line with me matters, and everything is communicated, and it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, and just a reminder that, you know, we have the chartered banks and also the local credit unions that are also offering support. So feel free to reach out to your banking institutions, whether they are credit unions or whether they're chartered banks. With that, we won't be able to take any more questions. We run out of time. But I do want to thank everyone for being here, for sending your questions to us, and for Eric for taking time, you know, to address all of them. You rightly pointed out, you know, it's a time when things are changing by the minute. We may not have an answer for everything today, but we are confident that, you know, we have the right people at the helms of the affair to get us the information in due course of time, and to listen to the concerns and receive the inputs. At the Chamber of Commerce, we have a dedicated email. It's info@windsoresexchamber.org, where you can send your suggestions, your inputs, your concerns, and we will relate to the right and to the appropriate authorities. We are in constant touch with Eric and his office, and they've been great to work with. They've been very receptive to suggestions. They've been very receptive to ideas. And there's been an open line of communication between us, which we thank very much Eric and his team for doing that. We also have more of these kind of sessions coming up, you know, so tomorrow we'll be bringing in the mayor, so you can ask and you can learn more about local issues and how, you know, the local administration is helping you. On Friday, we'll be bringing in Gary McNamara, the warden from the county. Similarly, you know, you can find out what's happening in the county. And then on Monday, we are bringing Rocco Rossi, who's the president of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And you learn more about what's happening in the province, what is the chamber network doing, and how we are collectively bringing you the information and hearing you and passing on your concerns and inputs to the right authorities throughout Ontario, but also in Canada. So, you know, you can go on our website and you can register for this. There is also on social media information that's being passed on the next webinars. So please continue to work with us, continue to provide your inputs. You know, the more you tell us what you really need, how things are working out for you or not working out for you, any inputs, any suggestions, we will take that and we will pass it on to the right authorities. So we need to hear from you, and we are here for you. The chamber, all my colleagues, my staff, they are there to help you. Our information is on our website, our emails on our website, so please reach out to us. We are there to help you out. The information on our website is displayed on the chat panel, so you can access that information there. Things that we discussed in this webinar, emails, phone numbers that Eric mentioned, we will make sure that we provide that information on the COVID-19 resources webpage as well, so you can access the information from there post this webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, so you will have the recorded version of this for your consumption, or if you'd like to pass it on to anyone that has not been able to participate live on the webinar. So with that, thank you to all attendees, and once again, Eric, thank you so much for making time and for everything that you do. It's not easy on anyone, and especially for you, because there's so much that is happening. And, I know that you're working around the clock to help us and help this community. So we appreciate very much everything that you're doing. And thank you for participating in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you to you and your team.